assisted by the soldiers, who gathered in great congregations for this wild worship in the open spaces among the tents and around the campfires. At length they all retired to rest, feeling an additional sense of safety in respect to the work of the morrow by having, as they supposed, entitled themselves by their piety to the protection of heaven. In the morning, too, in William's camp, the first thing done was to convene the army for a grand celebration of Mass. It is a curious illustration of the mingling of the religious, or perhaps we ought rather to say the superstitious sentiment of the times, with the spirit of war, that the bishop who officiated in the solemn service of the Mass wore a coat of mail under his pontifical attire, and an attendant stood by his side, while he was offering his prayers, with a steel-pointed spear in his hand, ready for the martial prelate to assume as soon as the service should be ended. Accordingly, when the religious duty was performed, the bishop threw off his surplice, took his spear, and mounting his white charger, which was also all saddled and bridled beside him, he headed a brigade of horse and rode on to the assault of the enemy. William himself mounted a very magnificent war horse from Spain, a present which he had formerly received from one of his wealthy barons. The name of the horse was Bayard. From William's neck was suspended some of the most sacred of the relics over which Harold had taken his false oath. He imagined that there would be some sort of charm in them to protect his life, and to make the judgment of heaven more sure against the perjurer. The standard which the Pope had blessed was borne by his side by a young standard-bearer, who was very proud of the honour. An older soldier, however, on whom the care of this standard officially devolved, had asked to be excused from carrying it. He wished, he said, to do his work that day with the sword. While making these preliminary arrangements for going into battle, William, with the party around him, stood upon a gentle eminence in the middle of the camp and in sight of the whole army. Everyone was struck with admiration at the splendid figure which their commander made, his large and well-formed limbs covered with steel, and his horse, whose form was as noble as that of his master, prancing restlessly, as if impatient for the battle to begin. When all were ready, the Norman army advanced gaily and joyously to attack the English line. But the gaiety and joyousness of the scene soon disappeared, as corps after corps got fairly engaged in the awful work of the day. For 10 long hours they reigned over the whole field, one widespread scene of havoc and death. Every soul among all those countless thousands, delivered up to the supreme dominion of the most dreadful passions, excited to the perfect frenzy of hatred, rage, and revenge, and all either mercilessly killing others or dying themselves in agony and despair. When night came, the Normans were everywhere victorious. They were in full possession of the field, and they rode triumphantly to and fro through Harold's camp, leaping their horses over the bodies of the dead and dying which covered the ground. Those of King Harold's followers that had escaped the slaughter of the day fled in hopeless confusion toward the north, where the flying masses strewed the roads for miles with the bodies of men who sank down on the way, spent with wounds or exhausted by fatigue. In the morning, William marshalled his men on the field, and called over the names of the officers and men as they had been registered in Normandy, for the purpose of ascertaining who were killed. While this melancholy ceremony was going on, 2 monks came in, sent from the remains of the English army, and saying that King Harold was missing, and that it was rumoured that he had been slain. If so, his body must be lying somewhere, they said, upon the field, and they wished for permission to make search for it. The permission was granted. With the aid of some soldiers they began to explore the ground, turning over and examining every lifeless form which, by the dress or the armour, might seem to be possibly the king's. Their search was for a long time vain. The ghastly faces of the dead were so mutated and changed that nobody could be identified. At length, however, a woman who had been Harold's family, and knew his person more intimately than they, found and recognized the body, and the monks and the soldiers carried it away. The Battle of Hastings sealed and settled the controversy in respect to the English crown. It is true that the adherents of Harold, and also those of Edgar Atheling, made afterwards various efforts to rally their forces and recover the kingdom, but in vain. William advanced to London, fortified himself there, and made excursions from that city as a centre until he reduced the island to his sway. He was crowned at length at Westminster Abbey, with great pomp and parade. He sent for Matilda to come and join him, and instated her in his palace as Queen of England. He confiscated the property of all the English nobles who had fought against him, and divided it among the Norman chieftains who had aided him in the invasion. He made various excursions to and from Normandy himself, being received everywhere throughout his dominions, on both sides of the Channel, with the most distinguished honours. In a word, he became, in the course of a few years after he landed, one of the greatest and most powerful potentates on the globe. How far all his riches and grandeur were from making him happy will appear in the following chapter. Section 11.